Hello, fourth year students. Last time we finished dealing with negation in English, and we are supposed to start a new topic or subject a new subject in English grammar that is mainly talking about questions. But before dealing with the questions in English, we have to know the main types of sentences in English. In fact, sentences in English are of four main types, and these types are used for each one of them is used for a specific purpose in communication. First type of sentences is called statements. How are statements defined? Statements are sentences in which the subject is always present, which means that they start with the subject. They have to start with the subject and generally precedes the verb. So where is the place of the subject? The place of the subject is at the beginning of the sentence before the verb. For example, John will speak to the boss today. This is a statement. First of all, this is a sentence, and the type of this sentence is a statement. Why is it a statement? We can know that it is a statement from its structure. It starts with a subject, John, and this subject comes before the verb, will speak. Statements are generally used in communication to give information or to emphasize something or to describe something. These are the main communicative functions for which we use statements in communication. But you have to pay attention to a very important point, which is that not all the times or not all the sentences, the statements that we are producing can start with a subject. Sometimes they can be understood and without a subject. And here we are having what is called ellipsis. The subject of the sentence has been ellipted, omitted, but it can be understood from the context. For instance, there are statements which are so commonly used in spoken English without subject, and yet they can be understood by our listeners. For example, when I say thank you, originally it is a statement that starts with the subject. I thank you. So I is the subject while thank is the verb. So, but when we say it, or when, especially in spoken English, when we use such an expression, such a statement in spoken English, we say only thank you without the subject. But the subject is what is understood from the context by the listener. He or she can understand that who is making the function, the action of thanking. It is the subject I. Again, for example, when we say sorry for your loss, sorry for your loss. This sentence starts with what? With the adjective. There is no subject and no verb. But still, sorry, the subject and the verb can be understood from the context of the sentence. Originally, it has to be, or it is to be, I'm sorry for your loss. Good to see you here. Okay, good to see you here. Again, another statement that is used in spoken English, but there is no subject and no verb. But still, and what is the type of such an expression? It is called a statement. It starts with the adjective. Okay, and from the context we can understand that the subject and the verb which have been ellipted or omitted from the structure of the statement, they are it is good to see you here. Now, the second type of sentences in English is called questions. How do we know questions? How can we recognize questions from the other types of sentences? In fact, questions are sentences which are marked by one or more of the following criteria. So we are going to touch upon three important criteria that can help us to identify questions from other types of sentences. Number one, or A, the placing of the operator immediately before the subject. So if we put the operator, the auxiliary, before the subject, here we are going to have a question. Which type of a question is this? It is a yes/no question. For example, will John speak to the boss today? Okay, so you see here, we put will at the operator before the subject John, and we end our question with a question mark, with our sentence, with a question mark. Of course, saying the question in this way will have a different tone, or will be said on different type of intonation from when we say this statement. We have to pay attention to a very important thing related to the structure, or how do we write how we use or produce these yes/no questions, especially if we are talking about negative yes/no questions. Okay, so if we want to say or to produce a negative yes/no question, the formal way, the formal form of such a question is that you have to produce the particle of negation not in its complete form. In this way, you have to put or to use this not after the subject. So this structure of your yes/no question will be in this way. You start your yes/no question with what? With the auxiliary, followed immediately by the subject, and after the subject you are using what, or you have to use what? The not. So the sentence or the question will be, did John not send it? Okay, did John not send it? This is what, this is the formal form of a negative yes/no question, in which the particle of negation, or the word we are using to negate this question not, is used in its full form. But generally speaking, native speakers of English, they tend to use the not in the negative yes/no question in its contracted form, in its short form. And in such a case, they are going to put this not, this contracted form of the not, after the operator, okay, and before the subject. So this not, this contracted form of the not, will separate between the operator and the subject. So in the informal form of the negative yes/no question will be in this way: didn't John send it? Didn't John send it? Now, so this is the first form of questions in English, in which we place the operator before the subject. The second form of questions in English is clarified here in number B, through the initial positioning of an interrogative or a WH element. So we can have another type of questions which are called WH questions, and they are called like that because they are going to start with WH words. So WH questions start with WH words like what, when, where, how many, how often, how long, and so on. And of course, making such a question it needs from us to follow certain rules. It is not enough that you start your sentence, or you make your sentence a WH question that you need only to use a WH word at the beginning. Of course, after the WH word, you have to use what? The operator, and after the operator there should be a subject, and after the subject the main verb. And this is again going to be what? Different according to what you are asking about. For example, who will speak to the boss today? Who will speak to the boss today? So you see here, this is a WH question because it starts with the WH word who, followed by the auxiliary will, And after will, here we are not having a subject because we are asking about the subject. And that's why here in the question you see there's no subject who is taking the place of, and the function of the subject is the WH word who itself. So after the operator we are having what, the main verb, and we are going to come later to the structure of the WH questions in detail when we are going to deal with them under the subject of questions in English. The last form of questions in English is made through the rising intonation. So if rising intonation we can be used to make a question without changing the structure. So your question here in this way is going to have the normal form of a statement. It's going to start with a subject followed by a verb, but the tone here is going to be different. The tone of the statement, the normal statement, is falling, but when you want to change it into a sentence, into a question, here you have to change the tone from falling into rising. Keep the structure as it is, but only you need to change the tone into the rising tone. So the previous sentence or statement, John will speak to the boss, can be said in a way that the listener can understand that we are asking. We are not giving information, but we are asking. In this way, John will speak to the boss. John will speak to the boss. You see, here we are putting the nucleus stress and the rising tone on the last word in the sentence, in the question, which is boss. Okay, and from this rising tone, who is listening to us can understand that we are actually asking but not informing. So these are the three forms from which we can understand that the sentences we are having are actually called or labeled as questions. Number 3, commands. Commands are sentences which normally have no overt grammatical subject. So they are sentences. Do they start with the subject? Yeah, they start with the subject, but this subject is not overt. Overt means clear. Okay? And whose verb is in the imperative form. What about the verb? The verb is in the imperative. Okay? In the order form. For example, close the door. Take your medicine. You see, these two sentences, they start with the simple adverb, with the infinitive verb of the adverb, and its imperative meaning. You are giving orders. Now, where are the subjects? Do these sentences have subjects? Yes, they have subjects, but these subjects are what are not clear, are not mentioned directly, expressed explicitly in the structure of the sentence. But we know that who is going to close the door or take the medicine? It is you. I am talking to you. So you are the subject. Finally, we have exclamations. The last form of the sentences in English is called exclamations. And exclamations are sentences which have an initial phrase introduced by what or how, without inversion of subject and operator. So these sentences that we call exclamations, again, they are going to start with WH words. Mainly, we have only two WH words, what and how. And here we are not asking, we are showing surprise. Okay? Another difference between the questions, WH questions and exclamations is that you remember we said in the WH questions we have to make this inversion between the operator and the subject. After the WH word, you have to put the operator before the subject. But here in the exclamatory sentences, you are not doing this. You start your sentence with what or how followed by a noun. okay, or adjective or adverb. But after this WH phrase, we call it WH phrase, you have to use what? Subject, and after the subject use your verb together with its operator. For example, what a nice girl she is. What a nice girl she is. So here I'm surprising. Okay, so I am starting my sentence with a WH phrase, and this WH phrase, you see, it consists of the WH word what followed by the noun phrase a nice girl. So we call it WH phrase. After this WH phrase, we have she, the subject, followed by the main verb is, the verb to be. How fast you run. How fast you run. Again, my sentence here is exclamatory. It starts with a WH phrase, how fast, how, the WH word plus the adverb fast, and then we have you run, the subject you, and the main verb run with no operator. So these are the four main forms of sentences in English, and as you have seen, we explained the communicative function, the main communicative functions for which each one of these forms is used for in communication. Thank you.